Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 11. Cannot believe it. How are we all? Hi, Chan.
All good,
That's good. All exhausted
happy, exhausted and happy.
at the same time. Fair
Yeah.
enough. You keep going, keep going. You're nearly there. So nearly out of the woods now. Okay, so a couple of housekeeping things before we kick off. Firstly, just a reminder to everyone that as if you didn't know this, your final project is due at 11:59 on Tuesday, the 6th of October. That's next week. The reason why it's in a slightly earlier in week 12 is because I have 140 to mark and I don't have any marking relief. So to make sure that I get them done by certification of grades, and in fact, it has to be before that, because it has to go through committee, to make sure I get them all done, then I need them in that little bit earlier. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of questions I've had about the word limit. So firstly, as you know, it's 2,500 words excluding the footnotes. It excludes appendices. So if there is legislation that you want to cite, you might want to put that in the appendix, because that would then take it out of your word count in the paper. There's no need to include a bibliography. I have said that before. But if you do want to include one just to show what research you've done, that's fine. I won't count that towards the word count either. Okay, it's really your substantive arguments is where your word count is. There isn't a margin, there isn't a 10% margin or a buffer in the word count. I don't understand the purpose of those, because why set you 2,500 words and not 2,750? Do you see what I mean? I don't really understand why people would have margins. But if you're like 10, 30 words over or something like that, I'm not going to stress about that. But please remember that one of the things that you're supposed to be showing or demonstrating is your ability to talk concisely with precision about issues as well. So do check for those sort of long-winded sentences or repetition where you've over-explained something because you're actually trying to help yourself understand it. So just, when you're proofreading, be mindful of that fact. Then we've got the research portfolio is also due, but that's in week 13. So 11:59 p.m. on Monday, the 12th of October. That needs to be a compilation of the workshop activities across the term. If you comply with all of the instructions and have a reasonable attempt at the task, so one sentence isn't going to be good enough, a reasonable attempt at the task and comply with the instructions, there's no reason why you can't get 20 out of 20 on that. Okay. There's no word limit for that particular one. Again, I've had questions about that. That's because each task varies quite substantially as to what you're supposed to do. So there's no word limit with that at all. Just focus on making sure that you have complied precisely with the instructions as set out in the workshop activities. And then finally, the Have Your Say survey. We've had some responses in, but not many. It would be great if we could get a big response from you guys for several reasons. I've just taken over this unit this year. I wasn't in charge of it prior to that. When I joined, it wasn't possible for me to do an overhaul of the unit. It was too late. We have lead times for substantial changes, but I did rewrite some of the modules within the unit just to, because I wanted to tailor it towards what we were doing with the project. So your feedback on the unit will be really helpful for curriculum renewal of this particular unit moving forward. So it would be great to know your thoughts on that. And finally, I will be here this time next week in case anyone wants to drop in and has any questions about their portfolio. Maybe they just want to talk about how stressed out they are, or you just want to provide some feedback on the unit, then I will be here at this time on this Zoom link. But it's certainly not obligatory for you to drop in if you are busy madly doing your portfolio. So this is our last substantive workshop. Okay. All right. Any questions about any of the things I just covered? Nope. Okay. All right, so I thought we would start off with a little poll to see how you guys found the reflective task, because I'm always interested to know how students feel about reflection. Okay, so I've launched it. There we go. So how did you find the reflective task this week? I enjoyed the process and found it insightful. I found it helpful. So didn't enjoy it, but found it helpful. I tend to focus only on criticism and I struggle to identify strengths. I find reflection quite difficult. I feel silly engaging in reflection. I haven't done mine yet, which I imagine there's some of you there who aren't up to speed with your portfolio. All right, just waiting for a few more. Okay. So closing the poll now. I'll share the results with you. Quite a mixed spread of results. So 23% said they enjoyed the process and found it insightful, and same amount found it helpful. Didn't necessarily enjoy it, but found it helpful. 8% said that you tend to focus only on criticism. That's actually quite a natural response. It's hard to get yourself out of that particular sort of way of thinking. And that's one of the reasons why we do reflection, is to get you to be positive about your improvements and identify things that you should keep doing, because that's a good thing that you're doing. 8% said I found reflection quite difficult. Again, that's quite normal. The more that you practice it, the better you get at it. 8% said I feel silly engaging in reflection on my own work and progress. Also a natural reaction as well when you're not used to doing it. And 31% said I haven't done it yet, which is fair enough. Okay, so let's get on to talking about what was set for the workshop. So there's no right answer here. We're just sharing our thoughts. It's really an interactive session where we're talking or sharing our ideas about our learning journey, reflecting on our progress, identifying a path moving forward, talking about its relevance to our career aspirations and those kinds of things. So I guess one of the first things I want to know is, how would you describe your your skill levels in terms of research and writing at the start, and where do you feel you've got to now? Have you seen improvements, do you think? Come on, there's no wrong answers.
Okay, I'll speak, Nicola. Okay, so my research skills were and writing skills were intermediate, say, like before this unit. I've definitely improved, and I need to improve more though, but I think that'll happen over time. I know that I'll refer back to this unit and some of the material like throughout my course as well. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you for being the first one off the blocks there, Chan, and being brave. Okay. Anyone else?
I actually haven't done this task yet, but I've actually been doing my Torts B final reflections today, and I actually spoke about doing this unit in I can't think of words. I've been reading too much at the moment, but basically doing this unit at the same time, and I actually have noticed that it's actually helped a lot with other subjects. Like there's been a couple of cases that I've been a little bit unsure on, and I've been able to use what I've learned here to sort of find some further reading that's probably helped explain some areas better. So probably what I've written today, I can probably bring across to this subject because it's sort of quite relevant. I found it overlapped a lot.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you. In some universities, research is part of an introduction to law subject. So to give you those basic skills that you need from the get-go. Now, I know that there is a week on research skills in introduction to law, but that's substantially smaller than other universities who have that. So to counter that, CQU's got this research unit that's a standalone unit, but obviously where you do that in your course planner is really a matter for you. So do you guys think that it's one of those things where it would be better if you did it earlier on, so that it gave you some, like you were saying, Samara, about gaining some skills to help you with your other units? Yeah, Tammy says definitely. Yeah. Okay. All right. So when it comes down to your project then, what are your thoughts on your project? I know that you guys will have that instinctive reaction of it's stressing me out right now because I'm in the middle of the final stages of the final draft. But if you were to reflect back on sort of having this project that you started out with, you developed it yourself, you developed your title, you had ownership of what you could look at. And then you have gone about really learning and getting into the detail of a particular topic. What are your thoughts on that process? Has it been enjoyable, sort of teaching yourself something new and current and that's quite innovative?
Yeah, I'll respond. I find it quite refreshing. I'm just at the end of my second year, and in my first year, I was told, don't quote your lecturers, don't quote your course notes, don't quote your textbook. The only thing that matters in studying law is judicial comment. And I almost felt as if I needed a kind of a reset coming into second year, where I'm now invited, encouraged, or taught to think more broadly. So I've really enjoyed the course for that reason, where I've discovered that law isn't just an isolated discipline, but it does take notice of scholarship in other disciplines and areas.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a shame that we don't see that in our legal system itself, in the court process. But it's certainly, and it's a growing area in terms of policy development and things like that, that we're now looking quite extensively to other disciplines to help lead the way in terms of policy. Having said that, it's still underneath the big political stamp. So it still might be that the policy that's developed isn't what is in everyone's best interest because it doesn't sit well politically. But at least we've got the opportunity now to be more considered and well-rounded when we're looking at policy, because we've started to take notice of criminology and psychology and all of those kinds of things. Okay, so how do you guys feel about the topics that you selected? Are you glad that you selected those topics?
I'm glad. I found it enjoyable learning about facial recognition technology. Like, as I kept researching and seeing all the different sources and reading the journal articles, and it's just interesting to know like what's happening in terms of technology, what the future looks like, and what the law will look like as well in terms of regulating this technology. So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is. I think because civil surveillance really touches everyone's lives in some way. Most of us have got phones. If we're not, we've got access to the internet. If not, we've seen CCTV in public spaces. So there's just that connection to our everyday lives, which is why I really liked it as a topic. And I was really pleased when I found the Commission's paper on it. Okay, so we've got a couple of comments in the chat. Tammy says, I found it more enjoyable once I started writing. Before that, I felt overwhelmed. I was worried about reaching over the word count, but then found myself heaps over. It's okay, Tammy, you'll get there. It's easy to do when you've got so much information because you've spent so long researching, to then narrow down what is useful. It all comes back to your key arguments though. So what's your conclusion? What arguments actually establish that conclusion? And then the sources that you use are connected to those arguments. Peter said, I found it very difficult to narrow the topic down, but once I became focused, it was a lot more enjoyable. A couple of you have agreed with that. So yeah, it sounds like getting started is the hardest bit. I think there's 2 points when it's hard. Getting started when you're not sure about your topic, and then getting started on the writing rather than the research. Transitioning from research to writing can be quite tricky as well. It feels overwhelming, and whether you think you can successfully convert things into written text. Yeah, so quite a few of you saying it's quite hard to get started. Yeah, that's fair enough, but you're nearly there. Look how far you've come now. Okay, so what skills do you guys still think that you need to work on some more in that research, writing, and self-management skill set?
I'll just speak quickly. So yeah, I definitely need to work on my legal writing skills. I feel that yeah, over time that hopefully it will get better. And I'm doing legal drafting with you as well, so that also helps. Yeah, so definitely my legal writing skills, and as well as my research skills. Like after taking this unit, it's definitely opened my eyes, like in terms of the sources that you can use, and how to find these sources as well, and like keywords that you could use, and like different strategies that you can apply. So yeah, those two skills.
Okay, thanks for that, Chan. And Tammy says she needs to work on making her writing more concise as well. So a couple of you are saying legal writing. Is that something that you think we need more materials on in the unit moving forward? A bit more on the writing aspect rather than just focusing on research and having that 1 week on writing?
Yeah, that could be a good idea.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think for myself, the writing things like, last week you were discussing passive writing and passive voice and active voice and that sort of thing. So I've done a lot of research in that in the last 7 days because I actually didn't know anything about it. So it changed the whole structure of my paper, to be honest. So that was a really worthwhile lesson last week for me. That just things like that tie into the legal writing part that I haven't experienced before was so if there was a little bit more, it may have just been me that hadn't experienced that, but I found it really valuable. So if I had have had it a bit earlier in the unit, it may have made things a little bit easier for me.
Okay. I think, I tried to pick up in the video on the most common things that I see. It's not really possible to fix people's writing, what high school couldn't do in like a couple of weeks. But I tried to pick up on the most common errors and sort of flag those. But you think that they need to come earlier on so that when you're starting the writing process in, say week 6 or something, that you've got that material there, Tammy? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's probably just me. But like I said, I don't speak for everyone else, but they probably were all over it. But for myself, it would have definitely helped me because by last week I had pretty much, because we had peer review, so I had done an almost complete draft, and then I've now sort of gone back and reworked that a fair bit. But which I would have done anyway, no doubt. So it was really but once I had those tips, which were really useful for me, then it worked out well. But maybe if I personally had them a few weeks before, it may have made things easier in the writing stage.
Okay, so earlier than week 8. Okay, noted. Rebecca says self-management. So that's that whole managing your time you're in charge of your project. How are you going to manage it over the course of the term? And that's something that it's really easy to slip here because you've got multiple, you probably study in multiple units, you've got multiple assessments, and it's easy to let legal research go because it's just this ongoing thing, and there's no immediate need like there is in another assessment that's due in week 7 and then another one's due in week 8. And so that self-management is one of the hardest things to do in this unit, I think. Is to keep yourself on track and not end up in that situation where you only start writing in week 10 and you've only got a short window to pull it all together. Okay, so Christopher says the weekly tests are way better than other assessments or exams, keep you on track rather than putting a subject off for a few weeks. I think that's true if, Christopher, if you're obviously one of those students who do them as you go along, which is the intention of the portfolio, is to skill build week on week. So we take, cases, and then we look at legislation and then secondary sources, and you're compiling 20% of the assessment whilst also skill building at the same time. That's the intention. But I think because it's not due in until the end, there are people who don't take that approach, and that also gets left until shortly before it's due in as well. And so they don't see the same benefit that perhaps you have seen in doing it week on week. How do you think you might go about improving these skills that you're talking about then, your writing skills and your self-management skills? What steps could you take to see an improvement there?
Can I just go back to a thing that I actually found quite difficult that I'm not sure whether anyone else struggled with?
Sure.
But I actually found that because I had read so much material, when I actually came to write it, sometimes I sort of organized all my material in tables, but then when I actually came to write it, there were some things I kept thinking, oh, is that my thoughts or have I read that somewhere else? Yeah. So that's probably what I found the hardest. I sort of ended up with information overload, and then trying to, some of it overlapped with what I thought, and then, I don't know, that's probably, I don't know, I've explained that very well, but that's probably what I struggle with the most. And I probably over-referenced mine a little bit because I just didn't want there to be, even though it perhaps in my idea, then I'd read it later on and I thought, oh, well, I better reference that because somebody else has had the same idea. I don't know. That's probably what I found the hardest. I sort of started out really organized in my approach for everything that I've researched, but somewhere along the line, it sort of got a bit messy.
And that's normal. That's completely normal. And I do the same thing, which is that if I subsequently find something that is an idea that I've written about already, and then I subsequently find someone has said that, I will still reference it because it's just not worth the risk of being accused of plagiarizing someone else's work. And at the end of the day, it didn't influence you producing it, but they're still the first in time with that idea. So, I think that err on the side of caution always in that situation. It's just not worth the risk. But it can get a bit like that when you get so deep into your project. You kind of lose where the boundaries are of your thoughts and everyone else's thoughts. That's completely normal. The way that I've kind of got over, and I don't think I've got over it, but I get better at doing it, is I have a much firmer idea of what I'm going to say before I start reading. So now I start with a plan earlier on, usually before I've even done my background reading, and then that means that I can start to write straight away. So as I'm reading a paper, I go, that's an interesting idea, I'll put that into the paper. And so I know that I'm grabbing the right source as I'm layering my ideas under a particular section. And then I'll go in and obviously make it all linked together and maybe move things around, but I've got the referencing already there, because right from the moment that I first do my research, I'm already structuring the paper and referencing as I go. But that's just something that comes, I think, with experience more than anything, is being able to pinpoint what you're going to say at the outset and then shaping your materials and your reading around that. Okay, all right. So now that the project is nearly complete, are there any areas you guys are still struggling with in your projects?
I think an area for me is that this is not my first degree, and my first one was in a completely different faculty in the social sciences. And so I think I still struggle a little bit with that legal writing balance, and not, if you're writing to be, in social sciences, often you're writing to be descriptive, and you want to have that emotional, like, these are the lived experiences, and I think I find myself often going, I've just written a paragraph, but I think I've gone too deep into the feelings of it, because I'm doing elder abuse, and so there's a lot of emotive stuff in it. And so I'm almost like advocating that we need to change the law for these reasons, and these reasons, I think I start drifting too far, that it's more descriptive. And I've been finding, and I've learned this as well in this class, that you need to be really to the point. And it's almost like a completely different writing style as well. So I think that's, even in my drafts now, when I'm reading through it, I'm like, I'm the same, a little bit over words, so I need to cut it down. And I know where I can cut, but they're just painful sentences to cut because they're nice.
It's always hard. It's always hard when we start to develop that pride in our work. Look at what I achieved in the, and then you go, I can't cut it. It's all brilliant. I think, that's a good point. I think there is space in law for some of that, acknowledgement of suffering, and that comes in through, your psychology, sociology, criminology sources, to acknowledge this, in this case, the suffering and the need for action in terms of elder abuse. But at the end of the day, the reasons why things have to be changed have to be objectively viewed. So, you have to make a reasoned, sustained argument as to why the law needs to change as well. So you can definitely have that, Stephanie. Don't lose it completely, but just come back to, I'm going to advocate in an objective manner for change and show you why it's the only logical solution is to make this change. It's the only logical, fair, and just solution. And if you can combine the two like that, it's going to make it a really powerful essay, in fact, because you acknowledge the humanity in it, but you also adhere to logic and reason in your arguments as well. Peter says, I come from an engineering background where A plus B must equal C. Then in the legal area, it's all about the argument, and it's a struggle for me sometimes to switch my brain between the two very different ways of thinking. Yeah, I completely understand that. And, but there is logic in arguments as well, though. Remember that. So some of your engineering background will support that idea of, okay, well, I'm going to make point A, and then logically I need to address B in order to really be convincing on that particular point. So there is some logical sort of analytical skills that do align there as well. So don't assume that you're doing a bad job just because you're an engineer.
I belong to the same fellowship of suffering as Stephanie, because my primary degree is in arts, and I've found it really challenging. Not so much in this subject, but more so in other subjects where I have to answer a legal problem. And I have tried to develop a technique of writing sentences that almost resemble an enactment, where I've got to state what the fact or the issue is, what's the legal subject, and what's the consequence of breaching whatever it is that I'm talking about. and that's been quite difficult for me to get my head around.
Fair enough. It's not just you, though. I mean, people who have even done legal studies at, say, high school, or done the TAFE course on justice, it's still another level up to come to law school and learn all of that IRAC methodology and all of that kind of stuff. So don't be too hard on yourselves. We get better at it with practice. I certainly was much better in my third year of my degree than I was in my first year at doing those things. So it's just a skill that you need to keep like any skill. It's just something that you need to keep practicing. All right, so a couple of other questions. Which aspects of the unit did you enjoy the most? So of all the weekly workshop tasks that you had to do, which ones did you enjoy? What really sort of floated your boat? Stephanie says peer review.
I enjoyed
Sorry, Chan.
That's okay. I enjoyed the project planning. And this is after I was able to frame the debate, because I was having so much trouble framing the debate. Once I established my problem question or area, I found the project planning was very helpful for me to sort of like flesh out ideas, figure out how I'm going to schedule my study time, and working towards the research paper as well, and covering key questions. So it just helped me just visualize what I need to do to achieve my goal. So
that was like the key that unlocked it for you. It was like the jigsaw piece that you needed to make it work. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah. And in fact, when I was stuck writing, so during the writing process, I was stuck for like a couple of days, and I just couldn't get out of it. And then I just thought, okay, I'm just going to go back to my project plan. And it really helped me, because it just reminded me of the reasons why, like the reasons behind the project plan and the purpose and the questions that I needed to cover. Even though eventually I changed the questions, it still acted as like a guide for me. So it was really helpful.
Yeah. Okay, good. Got a couple of other people saying the same thing in the chat, and a few of you saying that you found the peer review session helpful. So being able to, have someone else give you some insight into your project when you've been working on, it's that tunnel vision thing of when you've been working on it for so long, to have an outsider perspective. Rebecca says brainstorming. Okay, so peer review session was quite onerous, really, to try and get a working draft to someone, go through the process of reviewing their project, and then receiving that feedback, which is going to include constructive criticism. It's a pretty big sort of onerous task. So I'm glad that you guys actually, some of you found that quite useful, to have that in secondary perspective on your work. So if you were going to talk to a student who's going to do this unit with me next year, what advice would you give them with that hindsight that you now have?
I would say just take, I don't want to say advantage, that's not the word, but I'm going to use it. Take advantage of these tutorials and your feedback and your peer feedback, and because just along the way, I know that I've got incredibly helpful guidance because I've asked the questions, and you don't always get that in classes. And so I think that helps, because even with the feedback on our plans, on our project plans, you pose some really good questions for me to consider, and also help to narrow, like, okay, you're looking at this, bring it back down to this. And I think if you didn't take that time to ask questions or really put effort into your project plan at the beginning, you may have missed that advice and spent another 5 weeks focusing too broadly, and then get to the end where you're cutting thousands of words or skimming over the top of too many topics. So I think I would just say to another student, like, take advantage of this, ask the questions, come to the tutorials, and just because they're all designed to assist your final project. And I think for me, it's been really, really helpful.
Thanks for that, Stephanie. We've got Zoe says narrow down your topic early. So you sort of Chan, Stephanie and Zoe are all on that idea of, that early stage. If you can formulate your idea of where you're going and how you're going to get there at that early stage, that's really helps. Okay, Christopher says set aside plenty of time. There is that. There's definitely that. And then planning your time when you've got other things going on is really tricky. So it's important to diarize that time to make yourself do it as well. Okay, any other comments that you would?
I would just sound a word of warning that if people don't practice the incremental steps and exercises, they're going to become completely overwhelmed. The wealth of information and knowledge in any aspect of the topic will just draw in a person if they haven't learned to swim or at least paddle.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just saying thank you. Carry on, please.
I actually, I sort of followed it the way the course was sort of structured in the way I conducted my research, and I left the journal articles sort of towards the end. I'd probably say to read ahead because I'd sort of done a lot of work on cases and legislation sort of previously, and I'd never really looked at journal articles too much because they haven't really come up in the subjects that I have previously done. But when I actually looked at the journal articles for this particular topic, I actually found them maybe even the most useful, and I got some really good sources, some really great cases, not even as much from searching them myself, because I actually found that harder to sort of narrow down. But once I actually found some really sort of good articles, I was then able to sort of take those cases and find some really good information from that. So I sort of I think I would have saved a lot of time if I'd have started with the articles.
Yep, sure. And that's one of those things of where do you get your background information? Do you go straight to the primary sources, or sometimes it's actually better to read a textbook or, journal articles or encyclopedias on the point, because at that point you'll start to get references to other sources that might be useful. Yeah, and look, it's a tricky one in terms of structuring it, because secondary sources are very important for a theoretical essay. Unlike your problem question, they're really quite important to talk about how the law's developed, where it's going and where it should go. That's all really theoretical analysis of the law. So they're really important, but there's a little bit that we have to do at the beginning of, time management and analyzing the question, identifying what your question is and analyzing the question, and all of that stuff still has to appear quite early on because you've got your project plan to hand in. And so it's kind of like, how do I get it all in a decent amount of time for you guys? But yeah, you could always read ahead. That's absolutely right. And focus, maybe even sit down and say that, this weekend I'm going to focus on secondary sources and look at all the materials relevant to that. And then next weekend I'll do primary, or vice versa. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments about that? No? Okay. Well, it sounds like you guys, your reflections don't have to be, really, really extensive, but what I'm really looking for in your reflection when you come to write them, if you haven't done so already, is we're really looking for you to think about where you started and the learning journey, where you've ended up, and what's next. Okay, what's next for you? How is this going to help you moving forward? But what do you need to do to help yourself to move forward from here on as well? So it's there's no right answers to that, and everyone's on their own journey, obviously. But if you can reflect if you can start to reflect at this stage, it's really going to help you in your career moving forward. And I'm not just talking about legal practice. Legal practice is one of those areas where you definitely need to be a reflective practitioner. You're never going to be a partner if you're still performing at the newly qualified level 10 years in. Okay, so we have to develop and enhance our existing skills and knowledge to become that, partner or senior associate. And that means, of course, analyzing our work to identify, do I need to go and do one of the Law Society courses on this particular thing? Do I need to work with my supervisor on this particular thing? You need to be able to analyze your strengths and weaknesses and then respond accordingly. But it's not just even in that environment. If we go into any environment where we're working as a team member, in government policy, for example, or in not-for-profit organizations, or even in a legal team in, say, a mining firm, in those situations, you're going to be set tasks that are outside your normal work, that, what you're normally expected to do. It's going to stretch you, and you need to make sure that you rise to the challenge, review what went well, review what went wrong, so that you can move forward the next time you're set another challenge on a similar level, so that you can obviously advance your career through whatever organization you end up working for. It's only really if we're working in an existing area where we're already skilled and we're already experienced that we can sort of lay off that reflective practice. Otherwise, if we don't engage in it, we're not likely to see career transition. And then I guess, so the thing is, as some of you said in the poll, was, I feel a bit awkward about doing it. I find it quite difficult. I'm highly critical of myself. I feel a bit silly. All of those feelings are normal. But if you can start doing it now, by the time you get through to your end of your degree or through into your career, it will come much more naturally, and you will be able to focus on both the positives and the things that you need to work on. Okay, so unless there's any more comments, I've just got a couple of polls that I'd like you to do just to provide me with some overall feedback on the unit, and then you can talk to me about your ideas for the unit as well. But I thought a poll might just be a good idea just to get a general thought. Now, we've had a couple of people, and so this is why I'm launching this one, had a couple of people say things about the videos. So I just wanted to know your thoughts. Now, note that you can select more than one option on this poll. Okay, so as many as you like that apply. So did you find the videos helpful? Think that they were about the right length? You'd prefer shorter videos? I'd like videos that are more like traditional lectures with PowerPoints, because of course I didn't do any of those. I would like videos to go into more detail, like the study guide. Thought the videos were poor quality. Thought the quality was fine. Okay. So this is just reflecting on some sort of feedback that I've had outside of the workshops. And I won't be offended. And it's anonymous, I should say. So you can tell me you think they're rubbish if you like. Okay, just waiting for a few more people. Okay, I'm going to close it now. All right, so I'll share the results with you. So you all thought that they were helpful, and 77% of you thought that they were about the right length, which is interesting feedback, actually. Thank you for that, because I've had some people say that they would like longer ones, more like traditional lectures. I only got one of you saying that you would have preferred a more traditional style. 38% of you would like more detail in the videos, like the study guides, and then about half of you thought the quality was fine. Okay, so in terms of going into more detail, I guess the reason I didn't go, I could have delivered basically what's in the study guide, but I thought that you guys would find that you'd get frustrated with that, because then you've got two different mediums telling you the same thing. You could either just watch one or just read the other. And so I tried to provide sort of snapshots of the really important things that are in the study guide, rather than repeating it entirely. But if that doesn't work for you guys, if you'd rather just be able to pick between one or the other, as suits you. If you're more of an sort of audio visual person, I want to watch the video, and if you're more of I'd prefer to just download it and read it when I'm on the train commuting or whatever it happens to be, then that is definitely something I can look into. What are your thoughts about that?
I actually found the short videos really quite refreshing. I actually do a lot of training in my job, and one of the things that we've been looking at recently is microbursts of training, and we actually have been talking about them being a lot more effective than sort of your half an hour sessions or hour sessions, and a lot of investment's just gone into these sort of like 5-10 minute maximum training sessions. And I personally loved the short videos. I found them I like the more informal nature of it. I think with the study guide and the tutorials, there's more than sufficient information. So for me personally, this has probably been one of the better subjects for me for the short lectures.
Okay.
Nicola, I thought the contributions of both lecturers were refreshing and quite different to other subjects where there is only one lecturer. But I really appreciated the different perspectives and nuances that both brought to the course. I think the university has invested a lot of resource into this course.
I think, well, I have to say, Scott was just a machine. So he did a lot of that stuff. I came and a lot of that stuff was already there. So I just kind of added my flavor over the top with the weekly videos.
Yeah, but I thought that was really good.
Yeah.
I thought that was excellent.
Okay, thanks for that. Anyone else want to comment on the videos?
I agree with everything. I think, I get into the habit if I watch a lecture, I madly take notes. So if it's an hour, I could spend 2 hours listening to this lecture, trying to make sure I don't miss anything. And when it's the exact same thing as the study guide, when I read the study guide after, it's kind of frustrating because, so I usually will have them side by side and then copy over. So I just feel like having the short bursts and saying, really go and look back at this or read this part if you want to. And I agree with Ivan as well. Having Scott's videos, they're super in-depth as well. So if you wanted more info, you listen to get an idea of what the week is going to be, and then delve into it more. And it's, for me personally, I didn't waste as much time trying to, write down word for word what you're saying in notes to make sure I didn't miss anything. So I think that was super helpful for me.
That's good. I mean, the other thing is you got to remember the context for us, which is that this is not a content-based unit. It's not teaching you contract law 101. And so there isn't that need to kind of go, and in this case, this happened. And in this case, we're not tracking the development of the law. And so for us, I think this is for Scott as well. We both felt that it doesn't need that traditional format quite so much because we're talking about skills and we're giving you tips, but we're not teaching you the law, So, so for both of us actually agreed on that was the way to deliver the videos. What about the research videos? So I think there were Westlaw videos and Lexis ones that I did. Obviously where there was one available on the website already, then I would just use that. But I had to create some to help you see how to navigate around those sites. Were those helpful? Like, did you learn new stuff there, or did you already know that from intro? A couple of you saying that they were helpful. Okay. Because I'm just trying to sort of gauge where students come in at, and therefore how much we're elevating them in the unit. Okay, following along at the same time. Yeah, that was intentional, because I think that the best way to be good at research is to actually mimic and learn the process rather than, and that's why I didn't put that in the study guide itself, because if I went step 1, click on this, step 2, click on that, it's too dry and too difficult to follow. Even a flow chart is too tricky. I think you have to visualize it on the screen. The only problem with that is that Westlaw regularly overhauls its platform. So probably next year I'm going to have to do all those videos again, because they just keep changing it, and so it's never consistent. Okay, well, thank you for that feedback. All right, another thing is in relation to your general thoughts on the unit. Now, again, you can pick multiple. This is the last one, I promise. You can pick multiple things. It's anonymous, so I won't know who said what. I'll just launch it. It's just having a think. Okay, there we go. So I enjoyed the unit. I found it difficult. I didn't enjoy it. I enjoyed the project. I found the project difficult. I did not like the task. I would like to do smaller research tasks rather than one large project. I liked having one large project to work towards. I would like more focus on basic research skills, and there were sufficient resources and exercises to improve my research skills. So you see I've got the sort of negative and positive of each of those things there. Okay, so just select whatever you feel like. I'm just waiting for a couple more. Okay, I'm closing the poll now. All right, so I will share the results with you. So you can see that 69% of you enjoyed the unit, 38% found it difficult. That's fair enough. It's a big task. It's a big ask actually of you guys in your second year, I think. But if we left it to the third year, you would have had all that time where you needed those skills, especially when you start doing that critical analysis in second year, that where you really need those skills and yet you don't have them. One of you said you didn't enjoy the unit. I'm very sorry that that was the case. I wish that I could have made that better for you. Maybe next time reach out if you're struggling and want some help. I enjoyed the research project, so 10 out of 13, 77%, which is great. I'm glad that you got into your project after the initial difficulty of narrowing it down. 31% said you still found it difficult. Again, understandable. One of you didn't like the task. I would like to do a smaller research task rather than one large project. 23% of you said that. And so I've had a little bit of feedback sort of outside of this, where students have said they prefer to do like a series of research tasks rather than one large one. A couple of you have said, so 38%, I like having one large project, which means that we've only got about 60% answered that there, which suggests that it might be a bit closer than we think. I would like more focus on research skills, 31%, 54% thought the resources were okay. So it's a pretty even result. So that's interesting about what I decide to do next, because I'm now in the position where I can start working on it for this time next year as to whether or not we keep the big project or still have a project, but make it smaller in value and smaller in scale. What are your thoughts on that? So one of the students has said, why can't we do, say, a research task on cases, a research task on legislation, and then a project on secondary sources? So you do your critical analysis with your secondary sources there, and so distribute the weight more evenly. I guess the submission process would be staged rather than one final thing at the end. What do you guys think about that?
I'd just like to make a comment that I think it would be regrettable if the subject lost the purpose of making a law reform submission. And I just find that whole area fascinating, which I probably won't encounter in the rest of the law school. So I think that, if it's going to be broken down into smaller units or tasks, can it still be a submission to a law reform project.
Okay, thank you. That's a good comment. And I guess I'd have to sit and work that out, because it's the problem with that is that the law reform project is in itself usually so large that when we narrow it down to a particular topic, that's still quite a large topic. And then you've got that issue of what the weighting might not reflect how much work the student needs to do. So it's a tricky one. Anyone else?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. And there you go.
I'm going to be completely honest. When I had to start this course, I was not looking forward to it at all. I did not think I would enjoy the research. I completely agree. I actually think a big project is what it's actually all about. If you're breaking it up into small pieces, it's more just like the weekly tasks. I think the whole concept of the research is to just get completely overwhelmed by it all and have to sort of dig your way out of it. And I sort of, I tick nearly everything. Not that I didn't enjoy it, because I have enjoyed it, and I'm glad that we did a big research project, but I've definitely found it difficult. I have definitely been overwhelmed. I have been really quite stressed. But I think it's developed a lot more sort of skills. It's definitely developed my critical analysis. I've really enjoyed sort of picking at the law and sort of trying to find, because obviously this has been a really great area for us where there's been a lot of holes in the law. I've done mine on surveillance and drones, particularly going on to private property, which has sort of spilled into torts for me. I think I've got a better understanding from that. So there isn't, I know that you want the feedback to sort of give like that critical analysis of the course, but to be honest, there's probably not really much I would change. I feel like I've got a lot more from this than I probably thought I would. So yeah, I think the big project really is, as he said before, it is really what the subject's about. So I think it'd be a shame to change it.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. Anyone else? Chan, you were going to say something, weren't you?
So I was just going to say that I was quite intimidated by the research project. It took me a while to actually understand what was going on, to be honest with you. But I've surprised myself in terms of being able to not only like keep up to date with like the workshops, but also be able to start skimming, to start reading strategically, watch videos, do this, do that. Like I'm quite shocked, to be honest. Like I was just thinking about it, like this term was a roller coaster. And no, yeah, it really was. And, I've surprised myself, and I found that, after like going through the process, I really enjoyed learning about facial recognition technology. Like the technology itself was foreign to me. I had no idea, and then like researching the legislation, seeing what's happening around the world, like it just, it really opened my eyes. And yeah, it's gotten me like really like intrigued and excited about law. So I completely support having a final project at the end of the term, because it's like it is like your little baby, and like you're working towards something. And when you get to the end, when you're at the 2,500 words, you feel quite proud. So yeah, I support the final project.
Okay, thank you for that, Chan. I'm glad.
That's okay.
I'm glad that you feel like you really come on in that time frame. I completely understand that it's really intimidating, and I wonder how I can make that less intimidating for students when they first start out. It's really hard to know where to or how to do that.
I think for me, like I'm doing another unit and we've got an exam that's 60%. I don't see the difference between having one, paper that we've had the whole, semester to work on and build up, and each task and each week has kind of been a stepping stone to it, being weighted the same as an exam, which I find so much more pressure and stressful. And I think because this is a legal research task, if we were to go out in to the real world and want to do legal research, I mean, research can take 1 year, 2 years, 3, like you can be spending a very long time on it. And so I think, well, I understand shorter bursts. I think for this particular unit, for me, I've loved it and have gone, I really like this. Like I could go out, like I could graduate and try and work in this legal reform area. I really enjoy it. And so I think it's a good insight for that. If you wanted to go into research, if you want to go into this field, having 12 weeks to work on a project, and like Chan said, really, it's your baby, you're working on it, you're investing in it, you truly want to find the best answers. Whereas if I had 2 weeks to come up with the same thing, it wouldn't be nearly as impactful. So I really like it. I really, really enjoy it a lot.
Okay, thank you for that. It's interesting because this subject was designed to be a precursor to honours. So to help prepare people if they want to go and do honours or a master's program, then, we were laying the advanced research skills for those particular pursuits. I think it should change the title of the unit to knowledge enhancement. Yeah, well, I'm not sure that would appeal to everyone quite so much, but I'm not sure legal research appeals either. People see that they've got to do it and it's a core subject and there's collective groans across the course planner. But, as I said, it's a necessary, we can't get rid of this unit. We need it. We either do it this way or we have to create a new intro to law subject, a second intro to law subject to make sure that everybody has what they need to be able to do in their third year, go and find those cases and go and find sources that critically analyze those cases, etc. So it's a necessary unit. It's just how we deliver it so that it's the most effective delivery for the broadest amount of people. I mean, you won't please everybody. Okay, so it's not possible to please everyone. Some people don't like the idea of a project being worth 60% at the end because the way that they manage their studies is to move from one assessment task to another. So they have this slot at the end for revision and this assessment, and then they don't do as well as they'd hoped because they have to do their research and their writing in a 3-week window or whatever it happens to be. Whereas, you guys, in giving me this feedback, you're the ones that have done it over the duration of the term and therefore seen the benefit and complied with the way that it was designed. Yeah, so I guess unless there's any other comments, we're sort of on just slightly over time today. Any other comments or feedback, I will gladly receive them. None of them will upset me, I promise you. Or if you wanted to send me an email with some comments, that would also be great. Please complete the Have Your Say survey, but sometimes it doesn't give us enough insight, which is why I wanted to do this sort of reflective practitioner angle with you, with you giving me feedback after we talked about your reflection. Okay, I would like to say thank you so much for showing up every week, even when you've got other assessments on. I know that for me, it made the sessions much more engaging, and I think people got more out of it because you guys were here and interacting. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for making my first teaching term at CQU relatively straightforward. And I really hope that you guys will keep in touch, even if I don't see you again. I'm teaching legal drafting, legal research and intro next year. So unless you do legal drafting, you won't have me again. So thank you all very much. I wish you all the best of luck, not just with your project, but all your units this term and moving forward, and definitely keep in touch. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.